It's time now for the debate. And we're asking tonight, when does a crackdown become a massacre? Well, it seems that line has been crossed in the Syrian city of Hama, where rights groups say over 140 people have lost their lives in just 3 days. Forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad attacked the city in the most violent episode since unrest began 5 months ago. All of this during the Muslim holy month, and this is fast becoming known as the Ramadan massacre. So what then of diplomacy? Well, the UN Security Council is meeting for a second time tonight, but military action has been all but ruled out. So what, if anything, can be done to stop President al-Assad from killing his own people? Joining me tonight in Beirut, Nadim Houri is the director of the Human Rights Watch Bureau in that city. He's also a senior researcher on Syria and Lebanon. In the United States, Joshua Landis is director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. And on the phone, we're joined by Patrick Seal. He's a journalist and the author of The Struggle for Arab Independence. And last, but certainly not least, here in the studio, I'm welcomed by Syrian activist Majd Eid. Many thanks indeed to you all for being with us tonight. And remember, you too can participate in tonight's debate via Facebook. Just go to the France 24 debate page and let us know your thoughts. All right, I'd like to start with you, Majd. We're talking about Hama. It's very difficult to get reports out of this city. What do you think is happening there? What do you know?
Well, firstly, I would like to begin by sending my deepest condolences to all the families of martyrs, of all of these heroes who are now giving their lives to us to live now in freedom and liberty in Syria. What's happening in Hama, it's something horrible, really. It's massacres against the people. Even they are reaching the level of being motivated, of having genocide intentions against the Hama people, attacking the city from all sides, bombing buildings, bombing people. The number now, it's 140 people killed, but it's much more than that. We have 140 names, but we don't know how much more than that. Children being slaughtered in the streets. We have very horrific video for a child being beheaded on the floor. Little girl from Daraa was killed. Yeah, it's over imagination. It's out of imagination. It's something mythical, really. It's something. I don't know how to describe it, really. I'm speechless to describe it. Yeah.
All right. Nadim Houri in Beirut. Horrific reports coming out of Hama. And all of this taking place during the Muslim holy month. Do you think this is a time, of course, when there are larger than usual crowds at night? Do you think it's no coincidence that this offensive took place at this time?
No, I think the timing was, in our opinion, our analysis, tied to two key factors. First, the fact that Hama had effectively been out of government control now for almost 20 days. And it had become a symbol of the anti-government protests, a scene where the largest gatherings happen each Friday, and maybe an inspiration for other cities such as Deir ez-Zor and Homs and others to sort of try to reclaim the public space. The fact that Ramadan was coming along sort of threatened the authorities because it created the opportunity, the chance that what used to happen in terms of each Friday, in terms of large gatherings, may become a daily affair where people go to pray after breaking fast and having iftar, go to pray and then go out in large protests. So I think it was a bit of a preemptive strike by the authorities to try to regain control, or at least to scare people, to sort of try to regain the momentum and prevent the protesters from, quote-unquote, claiming more public space in Hama, but also in other cities. Because the violence is not limited to Hama right now. We're seeing it in Deir ez-Zor. We're seeing it today in Zabadani, a small town near Damascus. We're seeing it in some of the other smaller towns around Damascus. So it is sort of a new offensive. It reminds me a bit of what we saw in Daraa a couple of months ago. And unfortunately, we saw that Daraa not only had a huge human cost in terms of the killing, the torture, the detentions, but it also, I mean, we're talking about it failed. It failed because people in Daraa are again out in the streets now. Unfortunately, the Syrian authorities still believe somehow that a security and military option is viable, and that's clearly not the case.
Patrick Seal, we've had a lot of condemnation from various leaders today in Britain, in France, in the United States and elsewhere. Has the regime crossed a line here? This unrest and this violence has been going on for 5 months, but in the last few days, do you think a line has been crossed?
Well, I don't personally think so. Of course, the regime has mismanaged this crisis in the most terrible way. First of all, by the use of live fire. Right from the beginning, you see, when those children scrawled some graffiti on the wall in Deraa, they were manhandled, and when their parents protested again, the regime resorted to live fire. I think the second great mistake they've made is that President Bashar al-Assad has shown a lack of leadership. He hasn't spoken enough, he hasn't explained himself, and as a result, the reforms which they've announced and the call for a national dialogue have really appeared unconvincing. You can't get people into a dialogue while killing continues. So the mismanagement has been terrible, and of course it's a huge tragedy that so many people have been killed. It's worth mentioning, I think, at this stage, that whereas about 2,000 people have been killed among the protesters, the regime claims that about 500 members of the security services have also been killed. So there is an armed opposition. Now, having said that, I think one should add that one should not be surprised if the regime chooses to defend itself and to try and reclaim that nice phrase of Nadim Khouri's, the public space. I mean, you only have to look around the world and see the way the Chinese, for example, at Tiananmen Square, carried out a massacre. The Russians had a great war in Chechnya. Israel has constantly been killing, attempting to destroy Hezbollah and Hamas by invasions of Lebanon and Gaza. And, of course, the United States itself, in its wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, has killed tens of thousands of people and, of course, tortured many. So everybody will seek to defend itself, every regime. So one shouldn't be surprised at this killing, especially as the regime now feels it's kill or be killed.
And absolutely, and this is a regime struggling for survival. Let's just remind ourselves of the numbers so far since the uprising began in Syria some 5 months ago. These are UN figures: 2,000 people dead, 3,000 people missing, 12,000 people arrested. These are figures that the UN has been cited because the UN is, of course, meeting tonight, Josh Landis. Still no consensus whatsoever, though, even on bringing forward a resolution to condemn this violence.
Yes, Russia, China, some of the BRIC countries, the medium countries, have been against this because they're using Libya as the example. The Russians agreed to go for a resolution in the Security Council on Libya, and this turned into Europe trying to target Gaddafi, and it wasn't just to protect citizens. Russia got very upset about this and said, look, you've taken us way beyond the bounds of its original intent, and we're not going to do the same thing in Syria. So Russia and China are protecting Syria. Of course, Syria is much more important for Russia than Libya was, and strategically and in terms of interest in the Middle East. So there is, in some ways, an old Cold War element to this. But also the United States is very torn. Chief of Staff Mullen said today that there is no question about military intervention in Syria for the United States. But McCain and other Republican leaders have come out and said America has to intervene in Syria.
Right.
So the world is quite divided on this.
And I think we can take a quick listen to Mike Mullen, actually, who did more or less rule out any military engagement on the part of the United States. Let's have a quick listen to that.
There's no indication whatsoever that the Americans that we would get involved directly with respect to this. I think politically and diplomatically, we want to bring as much pressure as we possibly can to affect the change that so many countries are calling for.
And that's a position that's been echoed around the world. The British Foreign Minister William Hague also making a similar comment earlier today. Nadim Khouri, what is the point of a UN resolution if there's no chance of it ever being backed up by military engagement?
Look, I think this debate has sort of concentrated too much on sort of what I call, Libya question is sort of dominating so much of the space. And I agree, Syria is different than Libya in the sense that military action, no one's really considering it at this point. So let's talk about what we could do to protect civilians. Let's talk about what we can do to make sure that these reforms are passed, to make sure that sort of Syria starts respecting human rights. And I think the Security Council resolution is important for two factors. One, because it would voice international discontent towards that. It may simply be a moral condemnation at a first level, but it has implications because today, Syria, after 5 months of crushing and anti-government protests, can still claim, well, look, the international community in the form of the Security Council has not condemned us. So I think that's important. But I think, too, what's more important is if there is a consensus at the Security Council, that means maybe there can be joint actions. Maybe Russia, China, India, South Africa, Brazil can come together and exert pressure on the Syrian authorities, on President Bashar, to actually stop the killing, to get him to change tack, and to get the, who knows what they can actually offer up. But I think it would be an important step forward. There's a second angle, which we haven't talked about, which the Security Council should be discussing, which is the issue of accountability. We talk about the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring is also about accountability for past violations. In Syria, the security services are above the law, have been above the law for 40 years, and if protesters are going to have any trust in any Syrian government, security services have to be brought to account. And finally, the issue of access. I think this is a point that the Security Council can play an important role, and unfortunately, in the current draft, it's sort of somewhere buried towards the end. But we need to have independent observers and journalists inside Syria reporting on what is happening.
Right, but Assad
it is unacceptable that after 5 months this is controlled.
Assad is not showing any signs of allowing that at the moment. In fact, this is a regime, isn't it, Josh Landis, that is paying absolutely no heed whatsoever to what the international community says or does. Why would a UN resolution change that?
It's not going to change that. This battle is going to be decided on the streets of Syria. Now, of course, both sides, the Syrian state and the opposition, want foreign support, and Syria is actively pursuing Russia, China, the other countries in order to keep from getting an international condemnation through the Security Council, and so are the activists wooing the West. So the position of the West is important. America would like to see the Syrian regime fall, I think, but they don't want to get down that slippery slope because already America's overextended. We have a budget crisis, which you just highlighted, and to get involved in Syria, a country of 24 million people, the size of Iraq, which has deep sectarian problems, where many people still support the government against the rebel uprising, and the country is split down the middle. And this is going to be it's going to get more bloody, and I think the world is looking on, particularly at a time when we've seen troubles with rebels in Libya, in Egypt, and other places. Syrian opposition has not shown the sort of unity of leadership that it needs before the West will really adopt it and begin to take it on, because they don't know whether they're going to get into a situation where there's emulous factions fighting each other, as we see happening in Libya, or whether there is one leadership.
Majd, what are your thoughts when you see the international community rallying together and acting so quickly on Libya, but not doing much at all when it comes to Syria? Because there are similarities, aren't there? These are two leaders who are killing their own people. Simple as that.
Well, now, in general, the people speak about oil. We don't have oil in Syria. They do have oil in Libya. The others, well, I would like to add to that, Israel is playing a very major role now in the region. They are protecting the Syrian regime. They want, and it seems that they are succeeding in that. They are pressing on the American government to keep the Syrian regime because it was protecting their interests for like 40 years now. So they don't want to get rid of the region, especially that they are not sure of what's coming after this region. So what I would like to that, really, I was thinking of answering Mr. Patrick Seed because he said something about mistakes and mismanagement. I don't think that what's happening in Syria is a mistake and mismanagement. It's crimes against humanity. Killing 2,000 people, it's not a mistake. They are doing a critical surgery in the Syrian body now, in the Syria body now. They are killing people in a very very well-managed way. It's not mismanagement, and I really find it surprising that he's reducing the number of killed people to the half. Really, it's like this is a number that we know there are 140 people killed. Why he's reducing the number to 70%? Is he dreaming of writing another book for Bashar Assad as he wrote for his father? I'm really surprised of his position. So go back to the question.
Very quickly, because we're going to take a break.
Quickly. So we're asking the whole nations now. It's not a question of political position now. It's a question of morality, of a human ethics now. There are people are being slaughtered in Hama, in every spot in Syria now. They are killing everyone in Syria. It's a question of a humanitarian ethics. It's okay.
Hold that thought. We're going to have to come back to that in a moment. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have the headlines and we'll continue our debate on Syria. Don't go away.